G'day, I'm Paul. Today we have 13 dual cab utes plus a dyno booked. We want to figure out which is Australia's most powerful ute, but it's not just going to go to the most powerful. We want to see which ute is the closest at the wheels compared to its flywheel rating. We've got some exciting utes here as well, which will be pretty fun. What we don't have here though is the Maric that's about to be replaced and the LD BT-50, because that is just about to be updated as well, but we have everything else in the segment. Now we do have a stack of other ute content coming too over the next few weeks with all of these dual cab utes. So if you do want to check out some of that, make sure you hit subscribe, the bell icon as well. That's going to tell you when all of that goes live. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of this video, you can use the time codes on the screen. You can go ahead to your favorite ute or just see the winner, or if you're on YouTube, you can scroll down to do the same. Let's get cracking. So Ranger Raptor, we just finished on the dyno and I've got some exciting numbers. I'll tell you why they're exciting in a second. So with all of these cars, we're going to run them in their most aggressive drive mode setting. Most of the drive modes on all of these utes don't really do anything, but here in the Raptor, the Baja mode and the sport mode actually make some changes to exhaust sound and that kind of thing. So ran this in sport mode and also Baja mode just to triple check that it was going to be the same. So 210 kilowatts of power, 430 Newton meters of torque, and it's a loss of 28% compared to the flywheel.
And the power number is exciting because it pretty much matches what we got the last time we tested the Raptor, which is good news.
Next car. So Hilux has just come off the rollers. If you haven't seen our review of this yet, the link is in the description below, but this one has all the suspension changes. Engine is still the same. Now, in terms of the numbers, 122 kilowatts of power at the wheels, 402 Newton meters of torque, and it is a loss of 18.66% compared to the power at the flywheel. So pretty impressive numbers there, I thought, and I don't know, just dependable Hilux. So we'll move on to the next car. Now I'm going to caveat the results here on BT-50 really quickly. The car had 300 kilometers on the clock, so it was pretty much brand new. So we came up with 108.3 kilowatts of power at the rear wheels and 348.1 Newton meters of torque, which is a reduction of 22.6% compared to the flywheel output. So it's a fairly chunky reduction in comparison to the Hilux, I thought, but it is brand new, so perhaps that was a bit of a limiting factor. We do have a D-Max coming up as well, so we'll see how that goes in comparison to this. Now, what about the Wildtrak? You can see it's rained a stack while we've been doing this. So 145.6 kilowatts of power at the rear wheels, 471 Newton meters of torque, and that is down 20.86% compared to the flywheel numbers. So again, these numbers are pretty consistent with what we saw when we first ran it. And in my opinion, it's a pretty impressive number. So I think it is a hearty result there for the V6 diesel. And I'll be keen to see how this compares to the others when we look at the final percentages at the very end. Okay, so Nissan Navara. So I'm going to point out quickly that it rained really heavily briefly. So when this went onto the dyno, we did some runs just to clean the tyres and make sure they were all dry. So once they were done with that, we ramped it up to do the actual dyno runs. So this produces 140 kilowatts of power and 450 newton meters of torque at the flywheel. On the dyno, produced a pretty disappointing 92.2 kilowatts of power and 270.3 newton meters of torque, which is a reduction of 34 and a bit percent, which is huge. I think a lot of that comes down to these tyres, just like we saw with the Raptor. The bigger the tyres, the more it's going to lose on that rolling road dyno. So yeah, you do get a big sort of power reduction there when you look at all of that extra stuff they slap onto the Navara Warrior. The GWM has just gone up on the dyno. Now, keep in mind, this is the least powerful from the factory. So from the factory, it's 120 kilowatts and 400 newton meters. On the dyno, it produced 90 kilowatts of power and 328 newton meters of torque, which is only a 25% reduction. So it's actually not too bad. The one thing to keep in mind here, though, is that the only way for us to put this into rear-wheel drive mode is to use eco mode. Outside of that, it runs as a full-time four-wheel drive. So I don't know whether that's affected the output. The numbers seem about right. Maybe we could have got a little bit more out of it, but I reckon it's not a bad effort. So get ready to be confused. The Gladiator just came off the dyno. So we were having a lot of issues with this actually staying in gear. It kept kicking down, and as a result, that kind of gives you just very strange and weird results. I'll run you through what we came up with. So 209 kilowatts of power and 347 newton meters of torque is what is meant to be at the flywheel. The numbers we got were 121 kilowatts of power. The torque figure is irrelevant because it just kept kicking down and we couldn't get an accurate figure. And that's a reduction of 42%. So I'll let Zane explain at the end of the video when we do a quick run through of all the results, what that means for the Gladiator and why we couldn't get an accurate result. And then it all ended when the car just came up with warnings and stuff and we couldn't actually select a gear. So not a great result for the Gladiator. Musso has just finished, so factory, 133 kilowatts of power, 420 newton meters of torque at the flywheel. On the dyno, 100.6 and 343.9 newton meters of torque, reduction of 24.36%. Seems about right. Nothing sort of too crash hot, nothing too crazy, but a pretty respectable figure, I reckon. Ram is done. The Ram also had the same issues that the Gladiator did as well with the kickdown. So I think we finally got there in the end. So from the factory, 291 kilowatts of power and 556 newton meters of torque. And that produced 208 kilowatts of power and 465 newton meters of torque at the rear wheels. So that's a reduction of 28.5%. So at the end, I'll get Zane to run us through this one as well, just so we're going to be entirely clear on the process and why it couldn't achieve the same type of ease of results that some of the other utes could. it is time to chat D-Max, and get ready for this. I knew they'd be close, but I didn't expect this. D-Max out of the box is 140 kilowatts of power and 450 newton meters of torque. Earlier when we ran the BT-50 on the dyno, it was 108.3 kilowatts of power. The D-Max has just come in at 108.2. So it's almost bang on, completely bang on. And that means a power reduction of 22.7%, which seems to be about on par with the diesel utes and a pretty healthy figure as well. I would love to get one of these back later on when they do have a few more Ks on the clock to see whether that improves or not. Now though, the torque figure was a little bit strange. So we got 282 newton meters of torque compared to 348.1 in the BT-50. I had a quick chat with Zane when he was done with that run, and he said that that was because the torque converter wasn't locking up with this. And it was quite high in the RPM range that it actually locked up, and that is why we get the variance. But given they made almost exactly the same amount of power, they should have made the same amount of torque. The BT-50 locked up, and that was around that 350 newton meters of torque mark. Triton has just wrapped up on the dyno. How did we go? So it produces at the flywheel 133 kilowatts of power and 430 newton meters of torque. It produced 101.4 kilowatts of power and 322 newton meters at the wheels for a reduction of 23.75%. It's about what we're expecting, and it's interesting to watch all of these as we're going. They're all pretty much bang on exactly the same, so it's good to see no real outliers. This car has a few Ks on it as well, so it has well and truly been run in. So final cab off the rank is the Chevy Silverado, big old beast. Again, we had issues here with kickdown. So under the bonnet there, flywheel power and torque is 313 kilowatts of power and 624 newton meters of torque, which is pretty good. But at the rear wheels, 203.6 kilowatts of power and 435 newton meters of torque. So I tell you the torque figure, it's wrong, because when this kicked down, you can see that big surge in the torque figure. Every time it kicks down, because Zane's entering ratios and all of that information into the dyno, it is going to upset that figure, but the power figure is correct. The other interesting thing with that power figure being 35% down on the flywheel number is it actually is speed limited at 187 kilometers an hour. Zane reckons if this didn't have a speed limiter, it would actually be around the 220 kilowatt mark, which would place it around the same as the Ram in terms of the reduction between the flywheel and the rear wheels as well. So probably a bit more oomph left in this if only the speed limiter wasn't there. So what about the TRX? I teased you with it at the start. Unfortunately, it doesn't fit on Zane's dyno. So we ran all the cars in two-wheel drive mode. TRX, we wanted to put it into two-wheel drive mode, but it's impossible to do without attaching an ECU mod to it, which we didn't really want to do. And then on top of that, his four-wheel drive dyno has a wheelbase limit of 3.5 meters. The TRX is just over 3.6 meters in terms of the wheelbase length. So we are going to try and find an all-wheel drive dyno that will fit the TRX and add it in at this part of the video. But if we don't, unfortunately, we can't use the TRX for our dyno test.
Okay, it's time to run through some results, and I'll call out at this point too that just after this results section, I'm going to have a quick chat with dyno operator Zane, and he's going to run us through the settings that we use and just some of the caveats around the results as well. And as I mentioned at the start of the video, the winner here isn't the most powerful vehicle. That'd kind of be a pointless test because we already know on paper which one is. What we wanted to do here is see which had the least drivetrain loss between the flywheel and the road. We do that by calculating the percentage difference between the two, and the smallest percentage difference between the two is the winner because you're losing the least on the drivetrain there. So as you can see here, the clear winner is the Toyota Hilux. Congratulations. I wasn't expecting that. I think it just goes to show you how well sorted that drive line is with less than 20% drivetrain loss. they've cut down as many of those losses as possible and created a pretty power-efficient drivetrain. So hats off to Toyota for winning this test. Close second was the Ford Ranger V6 diesel. It came in at just under 21% drivetrain loss, which is also pretty good for a big V6 diesel. The bigger these engines are, the more potential they have for drivetrain loss. The rest of the four-cylinder pack, though, was pretty evenly spread. The BT-50 and the D-Max Duo were almost a dead heat on power, which is good news when you think about it, given they are the exact same car beneath the skin. We had a feeling that potentially with some more Ks on the clock, these would be a bit more competitive. They were both virtually brand new, and it meant that they were just getting run in on the dyno with a bit more sort of mileage on the clock. A diesel tends to perform a little bit better. We were a bit shocked though with the Navara and the Gladiator results. The Navara only just broke 90 kilowatts of power. We think that that was due to the tyres fitted to the Pro 4X Warrior. Likewise, the Gladiator, that also had big all-terrains too, and that did affect its result. It is worth keeping in mind though with the Gladiator and also our two other American pickup trucks, we had constant issues with the vehicles kicking down when locked into gear, so Zane will explain that in a bit more detail shortly. Let's talk about the GWM Cannon, which obtained the lowest overall power output. This was ultimately to be expected though, because on paper it has the lowest power output of all of the utes that we tested, and it only just lost to the Pro 4X Warrior by a couple of kilowatts, and that's despite the Nissan having significantly more power than the Great Wall. What about the Ranger Raptor? Despite all the negative comments in our last dyno test where we put the Raptor up against the V6 Wildtrak and also the four-cylinder Wildtrak, it hit almost the exact same numbers on a different dyno with a different car on a different date, showing you that a lot of power is actually lost through those big diameter tyres. Thankfully though, for the Raptor, it doesn't affect straight line performance. It's still nice and meaty and quick in a straight line. Righto, let's jump over to Zane and have a quick look at how everything was set up.
So we're all done with an epic day of dyno testing, and I'm with Zane, who's boss man here at Max Performance. Now, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, because last time we did dyno runs, we had a lot of people come in and give their opinions on stuff.
As you do. Yeah.
Yes. So what did we do with tyre pressures on all the utes?
So we've set them all at 40 psi.
Yep.
And we do that just for consistency between them, because one at 20 psi, one at 40 psi, it's going to grab the roller different.
Yep.
It's going to give you a different reading, different torque reading, all of it. So we make sure they're all the same. Even though they're different sizes, we make sure they're the same pressure.
Yeah, cool. We're actually surprised. I think it was the Hilux, was it like 28?
25 or something, I think, yeah. So low.
So low, that's why the ride was so good. Did we do anything interesting with drive modes? I think most of them didn't really have much.
Most of them are all right, just the Raptor and Baja, because it does free the exhaust up, which gives you more power. So.
Yeah, okay, cool. Now, kick down. I tried to explain this when I was running through some of the numbers. We found with Gladiator, the Silverado, and the Ram, they wouldn't let you hold, like, I don't know how dyno works. How do you normally do that, and why is kick down important?
Yeah, it's how they are. I know the American cars are like that, but on the pedal, basically, you get to a point, they've got a kick down point, and you can feel it. So generally, we ride it, we sort of get there, get the car moving, and then we feed it in, it'll stay in the gear. Or Tiptronic and manual mode's a lot easier. With these having a stick as well, and the Tiptronic not working, you can limit the maximum gear, but you can't hold it in gear. So it keep kicking down, which would give you false power and torque, really. So we managed to...
that stuff, right?
Yeah, that's that stuff. So we managed to half feed it and then up top give you... It wasn't easy to get an accurate number on those cars, realistically, you know what I mean?
And you were saying as well with the Silverado, that was actually speed limited and potentially it had a bit more room in it?
Definitely, yeah. It was 187 speed limit. So yeah, and that was well on its way. You can see it there, where it cuts. It was well on its way to make sort of 220, I reckon.
Chevy, what are you doing? You're missing out here. Now, one other thing as well that I want to run through is gear ratios. When you're setting up the dyno, how does that work and why is that important?
So with the roller dyno, it is tricky because it's derived torque that you're seeing there. So it's calculation of roller revolution. So it's not the actual torque that it's reading. Yeah, right. Okay. So to get that close, same tire pressure, enter the diff ratio and get it in 1-to-1 in the gearbox and make sure we have that all that data entered. That will give you the closest guesstimate of what it's going to be.
That's how we wound up, I guess, where we are now. We did all of those checks, we set all the tyre pressures the same, and that is about as accurate as you can.
Just to get as close as you can. But you're never going to get it right with, like we found with the BT-50 and the D-Max. Torque converter lockup was different between the two. So you'll get converter slip, you'll get tyre slip, different tyres, road tyres, all terrains.
Okay, next time we'll use a hub dyno. Look, I thought the results were really interesting. Based on you doing this all the time, did you find anything interesting here? Were you disappointed or surprised by any of the utes in particular?
Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, of course, 100%.
No. they're all about where I thought they'd be. I was a little disappointed with the BT-50 and the D-Max, honestly. I thought that was going to be a bit higher. But
yeah, they were brand new as well. I wonder if that has something
probably
to do
played a
with
little
it.
bit. You could smell the D-Max that was burning in.
Yep. Awesome. Well, mate, thank you so much for your time. It's been a long bloody day. So I think we're keen to do more of this. And let us know in the comments section down below. We've done dual cab utes. What else do you want us to dyno test? Because there's so many cars out there. We do other segments and stuff. Zane has an all-wheel drive dyno too that we can kind of put anything on, except the TRX because it wouldn't fit. But
it's too long.
Yeah. Anyway, let us know down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like it, you share it with your mates, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon. But until next time, take it easy.